Hi, I'm Jessica Wilkins from Los Angeles, California. I started learning how to code back in 2020 and started working about a couple of years later. And worked at a JavaScript consultancy for a little bit, and then now work full time for Free Code Camp. And so mainly working with like front end technologies and with the curriculum development side. We've got some really exciting things coming up in the pipeline over the next few months. But I'm really happy to be here talking about open source.
Hey,
Definitely
just
glad to have you, Jessica.
she's just gonna tease us with really exciting things.
I'm being super, super vague because Quincy would kill me if I just like straight up just told everybody what we were working on. So I'm gonna be super vague and just be like, it's really exciting, just trust me. So yeah.
Um, I'm Meg, and I am a Ruby on Rails developer. I also work a lot with JavaScript. Um, I am in the Philadelphia area, and I work for Penn Medicine as an application developer. And um, fun fact about myself. Um, I was on the Latin dance team at Temple University, where I studied Spanish as a major. And I don't use that professionally, but it doesn't mean I won't later. I got
Yep, you just
distracted halfway through my intro by the cat in the spaceship down here that we have. But
yep, you just need an invitation to Dancing with the Stars, right? And then you're all set.
oh boy. Oh man. You'll be my partner, Fee. We'll do
I
it
got
together.
you. I got you. Did you give us a fun fact, Jessica?
Oh, I totally forgot that. Fun fact. Oh gosh. I was on a guest spot for like all of like 10 seconds on the Fox show The Orville.
Oh,
I got
okay.
a call back when I
Cool.
was a musician because I'm a career changer. So before I did tech, I was a musician, and they called me up and they're like, "Do you want to play an alien with four other musicians on a TV show?" And I was like, "Sure." Because that's totally normal in Los Angeles. And so I got to like be on the Orville, and Seth MacFarlane was there, so I got to beat him. So that was cool. So yeah, I guess that's my fun fact.
There you go.
That's awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Rosenberg. I am also a self-taught software developer. I started with Ruby on Rails about 15 years ago, doing that and JavaScript in that time, as well as a little iOS programming back when it was still in Objective-C. For the most part, I've done a lot of startups and web development and contributed to a number of open source libraries, primarily in Ruby. And I'll be starting a new job on Monday. So I'm looking forward to that. Fun fact about myself, I have allowed myself to be bit by birds on 3 out of 7 continents. So if I get to another one, I'll try and bring that up to 4.
Is there a specific goal associated with it?
I just think birds are really cute. And
Okay.
every so often, if you put your finger out, they'll go and
Yeah.
just like give it a nibble, and it doesn't hurt that much. I mean, unless it's a really dangerous
Yeah.
bird and you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But the ones that I've been nibbled by, they've been very gentle.
Which continents are they?
North America, Europe, and Asia.
You gotta get a penguin to get in there.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's an expensive trip down to the Antarctic.
But thank you all for the introductions and also the fun facts. They were fun and hopefully they're also factual. Um, so I'm just going to put the questions that I asked for the panels also in chat so everyone can view it. So the first question, just for everyone's sake, can you give us a simple explanation of open source and what it means to you specifically? So feel free to unmute and then jump right in.
Since I didn't mute myself, I'll go first, and then everyone else will cycle through it. Yeah, for me, open source software is primarily a catch-all term for software that is generally free to use and free to modify. Free as in beer, not as in speech. Um, the reason we emphasize that is no one's going to charge you for open source software, but it typically comes with a license that will tell you how it can be used. So you may only use it in certain ways according to its license, and there are consequences for violating those. But in general, it's also a software program, some set of functionality that you can read the instructions that the computer will execute. And because of that, you can change those instructions. So that's a nutshell of OSS for me.
And what does open source mean to you? So like, why is this like an
Oh,
important, yeah.
yeah. For me, it's like it's the rising tide that lifts all boats. Because we have so much open source software, we all don't have to write the exact same functions that, like, I don't know, 99 out of 100 of us need for 99 out of 100 projects. So, like, never write your own encryption library. First of all, you can't do it better than the experts. And second, there's a really, really good one that's free. Just use it and your users are secured. It's a really great ecosystem to belong to.
So that was like a really good definition. Uh, I have like the definition. I pasted a link in the chat, and it's long. It's this organization called Open Source Initiative keeps this definition, and they created a page in 2006, and they come back and modify it. So it's like a 10-part definition. So it's almost like a manifesto or something. So definitely check that out if you want a thorough technical definition of what open source is. Aaron did bring up a good point about licensing. If you plan to use your open source code in something that you may want to profit off of, that's where it gets a little tricky. I have a whole list of links that I'm going to paste in here at the end.
I love it.
Yeah, I come with the resources. But to me personally, I really fell in love with this ripple effect that open source has, and how you can fork a project from someone else, from like the original, or you can fork a fork, or just chain these, derivations of a project. And it also goes hand in hand with version control, because everything's recorded, all the changes are recorded, so you could follow them all the way back to the original person who wrote this line of code. So even if there's this gigantic, huge project that was built within an open source initiative, like each person that touched that, their fingerprint on that is always going to be there. It's always going to exist. Even if their code is ripped out of there, there's still a record of them having been there. And to me, that's like really neat. It's a way to leave a legacy until like the end of the world arrives and all the machines die, but it's also just a way to communicate through a language that goes beyond our spoken language. It's super cool.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's not a whole lot to follow up with that. The only thing I would just add to that is like the overall open source community. I felt like over the past few years, there's been more emphasis on building out the community around these different projects and helping get more people involved, especially newcomers and career changers. And so I'll post a link in the chat, but there's a really great project called Open Sauce, and a lot of Meg and I have a lot of friends that work at Open Sauce. It's a small startup, but they're doing really cool stuff with really making open source more accessible and getting people involved with starting to contribute and giving a lot of guides on how to get started and the pitfalls. And they have a guide on just for open source maintainers and all that stuff. So I highly suggest just checking out opensauced.pizza. Is their website there, and so they have a fun little website. And the owner of the project and the company is really cool too, Brian Douglas. But yeah, I think overall, like open source, they've just been like a lot of projects have been focused on building out communities around it and just helping bring more people on to contributors and maintainers there. And so I think it's just a really cool time to be involved with open source. And I guess what it means to me personally is just that I really got started, I guess, professionally with open source. That's how I got started with Free Code Camp, at least part-time, and then eventually later on full-time. It's because I just started contributing to Free Code Camp. I was already using it, learning it. And then I saw that there were open issues and I really liked the community. And so I slowly but surely started contributing in different ways through their articles, through their actual code contributions, getting involved with the community. And then I started writing for them part-time. And then after I left my last job, I was able to work with them full-time. So there's so many professional benefits to contributing to open source as well as personal ones. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that later on there.
Thank you for that amazing segue. I'm going to let you take that one for us. So beyond the technical aspects of what open source is, like what are some personal or professional reasons someone would want to contribute to open source?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the professional ones. And so I know a lot of us are like self-taught developers. It's like the name of the group and stuff like that. And so a lot of people are like, well, how am I supposed to gain experience? And if I don't have like college internships and stuff like that through a computer science degree. And so open source is a great way to get started. And it can be really intimidating because you're like, I don't know this project. I don't know this group of people. How am I supposed to contribute? But I always suggest people just start off small and look for smaller issues. A lot of projects will label like good first issue or beginner friendly issue or first timers only or some sort of variation of that tag on there, and start off with just the smaller issues. And so it's not going to be heavy lifting in terms of code and stuff like that, but it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet and get around, understanding how the code base works and how the project works. But then also just trying the tool and using the tool is really important, because a lot of people will just jump straight into the issues, but you really do need to understand like what is the actual project and how it works. And that's how you can build relationships with this in this industry. You can start slowly contributing over months and start working with the maintainers and start developing relationships with them. And then they start to actually see your work. And so now you're not much of a risk. They're like, oh, we've already seen you code for like 6 months or 8 months or 9 months. And I've known plenty of people that have gotten jobs through open source, including myself, because it's like, well, I've already seen your work. I don't need to interview you. I've literally, I guess, already interviewed you. I already know what you're all about technically and socially, and you already work well with the team. So there's not a whole lot of risk there. And so that's another way to gain that experience if you don't have like college internships and stuff like that, and you're helping to build out your career, go to those next levels and steps there, and also just build out your network. And so, and then I think for a personal reason too, I love using open source, especially if I'm learning a new technology, and start kind of playing around with different tools and stuff that I'm not familiar with. And I always just, again, start off slow, but then I start to kind of get my feet wet with those new tools and start just building out different connections with people, and then asking a whole bunch of questions within their like Discord communities and Slack groups and stuff like that. And so that's another great way to just kind of build out your skill set, and then also just make new friends and meet really cool people along the way. So that's just kind of my long little rant about, or not rant, but this little spiel about the professional and personal benefits of contributing to open source.
I mean, can I include some of the technical aspects? Is that okay? Is that allowed?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
no, you can't do it, man.
You're kind of boxing me in here, Pete.
Nah. Yeah, if it makes answering the question easier, feel free. Yes.
I did neglect to mention in the beginning that I I hesitate to use the term career changer because before I became a programmer, I was just kind of doing stuff to get money. I didn't really have a career. Um, and then when I stumbled on this, I was just like, whoa, I could see myself like wanting to go to work if this was my job. So yeah, I definitely I went and I enrolled in Flatiron School's online self-paced software engineering curriculum. So I did that boot camp grad, and I'm also self-taught. Every programmer self-taught, like every programmer. So that's why anybody can join. Uh, so for the technical aspects, like Jessica had mentioned, when you're new out of the gate, um, you know, all these jobs are like, hey, junior developer, you must have a year of experience. And it's like, okay, well, I need to get a job to get experience. And if I can't get a job without experience, how am I gonna, it's that snake eating its own tail. And open source, like participating in projects like that is a really good way to get solid experience because you can totally put that stuff on your resume. Especially if you find a community, like for example, open source, where it's a community that has a certain amount of projects that they work on. It's when you're beginning with contributing to open source, it's harder to just kind of like pick up things from different repositories because you have to get in there, you have to get familiar with the code, what's required as a contributor, does this work on my machine? Like there's just a lot more to go through with installation. When these projects are backed by communities, they are able to build out more documentation and more support for people who want to contribute. Because like a vast majority of open source projects you'll find are just like one person keeping it going. And that's another benefit of open source. You can make one, you can start a project on your own, and other people might want to contribute to your project. So then you're on the flip side and you're reviewing other people's code instead of getting your code reviewed. And so you get experience with that. So you're getting like experience with doing these kinds of workflows before you're on a team, like the asynchronous communication, kind of writing up things like issues. If you want to plan out a project, that GitHub and GitLab both have projects and milestones and all these things. So you can start your own passion project if you want to make an app or something that you're like, yeah, this would be cool if I had this. I'm going to just build it myself and tinker around with stuff. And like I've done that on my own apps for things that I want to, like features I want to add. I'll just write them out because I'm like, I'm gonna forget if I don't do this. So I just put out issues, and you can put these things on your resume and be like, hey, I'm working on this project. And if someone goes on there and it's like they're taking pull requests from other people, they have like issues and projects and stuff, it shows that you not only have experience coding, but with the things that come along with it. And it makes you seem like a more whole developer. And also like you make friends too if you join a coding community. It's you'd be surprised, just like jumping on a project. Some of them might have like an office hour once a week where they get together and they're like, hey, we're all working on this. And you just start going and then get to know people. So yeah, it's pretty cool that way.
Those two covered almost all of it. So the only addition I have to add is working with open source is kind of the same effect for you professionally and personally that having side projects is, or exploring your own passion projects. There is no third door thinking. The more time you do something, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. The more shots at bat you have, the more patterns you'll see, the more ways of tackling problems will both seem unique to specific cases and generalized over, oh, this is how I do this thing all the time, like a depth first search, for example. So the biggest advantage I would say is practice, practice, practice. And then the second biggest, just to echo what Jessica and Megan said, is you get experience working with so many different types of projects, how they're structured, how they think about their architecture, what their prescribed and anticipated as well as unanticipated evolutions are. And then you work with so many different types of people. These will be people very different or very similar to those you work with at your job. Um, the biggest thing about software is collaboration with other people. The better you can collaborate with a bunch of different people and understand how they approach code, the better you can tailor your approach to them or find the best way to get to solutions going forward. Because we're generally not fighting each other. We're generally communicating poorly because we're just squishy humans and we're not great at that yet. Maybe in the next millennia.
What are some reasonable first steps for a beginner to get involved in an open source community? So not necessarily just on a repository, but also in a community.
One that's already been mentioned in the group so far is there are groups that get you in touch with certain open source communities based on your interests. Excuse me. I don't know if this is like the best place to dive in feet first, but if you are really into animation or 3D modeling, Blender is an open source tool, and therefore you would find a community that thinks very much in the same way you do, at least in terms of the goals that they're trying to express with this software. I've never done 3D modeling. It could be very hard. It could be very easy. It could depend entirely on your brain. And it might be like your jam and not mine. So communities that connect you with purpose, communities that also connect you with guidance. I believe it was mentioned that a number of issues on GitHub will stay if they're beginner friendly. And there's usually someone in the community who's written the ticket or written most of the README and can and then can guide you in that path. Like, oh, hey, at so-and-so, how do I start on ticket 185? And they'll give you a good sense. Yeah, those are generally the best ways. Like as soon as you get connected, you'll start finding the things you can do. And then there are just iterative steps beyond that. If you try and get it set up on your machine and it's hard, fix the README. That doesn't even contribute code, but it helps every other person who comes to this project after you by having the most up-to-date, clear instructions in the README. And that gives people a good impression for the product. And that gives people more incentive to participate with a community that takes that kind of care of its members.
Yeah, there's so many great points that Aaron had mentioned there, and I think like if you're already using a tool and you know it's open source, then try to start to check out their community. A lot of open source projects will have some sort of Discord or Slack group or use GitHub discussions. They'll have some place for you to interact with the maintainers. So I would start there and just start meeting some of the other contributors and maintainers and getting a sense of what the project's about and what open issues are and what features are up on the horizon if they're talking about that. But then also too, if you are part of just other developer communities, reach out to your friends and be like, hey, what kind of open source projects are you guys working on, and get recommendations from your friends. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm contributing to Free Code Camp because it's awesome, and are contributing to this or that or whatever. And people will give you their recommendations, and you can kind of check it out. And that's kind of what worked for me when I started. Like, people were just like, oh, this is what I'm working on, and I'm like, oh, let me go check that out, let me go bookmark it. And then also, if you're attending other types of meetups, people might mention another open source project, and you kind of just bookmark that and take a look at it and be like, yeah, this looks really cool, this looks like a cool tool that I want to use. So those are some good ways to kind of just start checking out. And just when you get started, don't think like, oh, you're going to jump straight into this major feature. Even if you've been programming for like 10, 15, 20 years, like, you still have to like onboard and get used to the project, and you're not going to fully understand the system just yet. So just start off really small, and say, I'm just going to take one step after another. And then also too, you have a fresh perspective. And there's so many times, I like the README example that Aaron had mentioned, like that has happened to me with open source. And that's also happened on my first job, where they were like, okay, here's your project, go set this up. And I was like, I'm running into these issues. They're like, oh yeah, you gotta like install these packages. And I was like, that wasn't in the README, you know? And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, I know I'm missing something. I'm not crazy, right? And so, like, if you are trying to set up the project and you're just like, I think something's wrong, and then you start detailing it, oftentimes it's just missed out in the README, or they made some updates and they forgot to update it. So documentation updates are really important there. So those are kind of some of the ways that you can kind of get started. And then also, I mentioned in the chat, like, if you are using the tool and you spot some bugs, or if they just rolled out something in beta, some new feature, and there's some bugs there that they didn't catch, and you caught it, and you have just some fresh eyes, then, open up an issue and just explain what bug you found, and let them know, and the maintainers will be really appreciative of that. And so even though it's not directly coding related, that's still really, really helpful, and that's a way that you can start to get started.
100 million thousand on the README. What both Aaron and Jessica said. When it comes to the README, you can even like for an extremely well-established project that's being used by so many people, you can almost always find something to make it more clear. And not even just the README, because some projects have like document that is for contributors, like, so they'll have the README and then like hey, do you want to contribute to this project? Come check out our guide, and it links to a more in-depth step-by-step document. Well, what if I'm running Windows on a virtual machine? What if I have Linux with Docker? What if I have a computer that I bought 10 years ago and has like so much crap on it that it runs really super slow? Like, you can always do something to improve that. Definitely, like, finding anything in documentation at all. Websites, like, when you're learning new stuff, there's a static site generator called Jekyll, and it's the one that GitHub uses for their GitHub pages. And I was on there reading documentation to try to figure something out, and noticed that they kept referring to the master branch after GitHub did that big switch over to main. If anyone's not familiar, the default branch used to be called master. And oh, I didn't realize I still have my name as Queen of Co-working. I'm gonna change that. So I was like, oh, hey, there we go. There we go. So I was like, oh, hey, you guys forgot this. And I put an issue in, and then I put in a pull request to fix the issue. And normally I wouldn't like say, yeah, go do this. But because usually if you find an issue, it's best to put the issue in, and you can like write a note on it, say like, hey, I'd be interested in working on this. But it's kind of like, yeah, they're definitely going to want to change it. So then I just made a pull request right away. But I do say that because if you raise an issue, sometimes you don't know what's going on inside people's brains, and they might be like, oh, well, we're in the middle of a big rehaul, so this is all gonna be changed in a month, and you could have went and done a whole bunch of work on a pull request for nothing that they won't accept. Other ways is uh act as a project manager. For projects that are pretty big and have a community behind them, they need people to organize stuff, because just like a group of programmers coming together and being like, yeah, this would be cool, this would be awesome, this would be like someone, they need mom or dad to come in and be like, okay, now this is, you all have wonderful ideas, but what's the most important one? We have to, let's figure this out, you know? So having someone to herd the cats is like, it's so like this unspoken thing, but like so many projects need project managers, because the main contributors end up doing coding and project managing. So it really helps for people who maintain a repository to maybe just have a weekly meeting with someone who's like, hey, I'll help out with that while I'm kind of ramping up on my education, because then you get to see how it all works. There's also, this is more technically inclined, but testing. So this comes back to issue, like raising issues, but just trying to break stuff. Just try to break everything. Try to hack into it. Try to break it. Yeah. And design, like UX UI designers, if you're on there and you notice like, ooh, that color scheme is not accessible, or when that looks great, but then I go on my phone and it looks like trash, like people, a lot of times with something with a UI, I actually talked to someone today who's working on his own project that generates bedtime stories for children. He's like, yeah, some other people are getting into it. I want to do some upgrades, but like I suck at UI. Like, it's the part that, and so just having someone who might look at that and be like, oh, here's a Figma design that I made up, that I think would be really cool. Like, heck, that helps so much. Just be like, oh, you know more about this than I do. Thank you. Thank you for helping. And you get like mentions in there, you get credit. Like people who are doing the codes really appreciate people who aren't doing the codes but still contribute like a lot. Even social media and like funding and stuff, like fundraising and promoting stuff on social media. If you have like a, for Hacktoberfest or something, you got all these issues ready. Usually Hacktoberfest they go like that, but getting the word out, there's so much stuff you could do. I'm gonna stop talking before I keep going.
No, this is all great. This is all great. Did anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add like one thing. I think one thing that a lot of new people coming into open source when they're opening up an issue is they feel like they have to have the solution too. And I've heard this a lot where they're like, oh, well, there's this problem, but I don't know how to solve it. It's like, that's totally fine. Like if you just spot a bug within the system, or you spot something is wrong, or you have like something isn't clear, you could just say, describe what the bug is. You don't have to have like the code solution or the perfect approach of how to fix it, or even understand like what the exact problem is in the code base. And so there's a lot of people that like stop themselves from reporting the issue because they're like, well, I don't know how to fix it. It's like, that's totally fine. Like, just report it and be like, I went to this page and it's supposed to do this, but it's not. It's doing this instead. I have no clue why it's doing that, and I just wanted to report this. And then the maintainers will actually jump in and be like, oh, okay, there's something going wrong here, here, and here, and we'll open this up. And so if you're not really sure how to fix it, that's totally fine. Just report it, and the least that they could do is they'll say, oh yeah, actually we're fixing it here, or that's a known bug or whatever, and they might just close it. But always just open up an issue if you spot something, or if you're just wanting to have like a feature request or something like that, and then the maintainers will just take the conversation from there and see what the next steps should be.
Two things to know as a contributor coming into open source. If there's documentation there, please read it, because the maintainer of the project took the time, or somebody, another contributor took the time to write that out to help you succeed with this project. You will have your pull request reviewed, and they may suggest things. Just instead of like skimming through, just like read through what is said, because a lot of things, a lot of questions that come up I see are like answered in the project already. It's just people haven't read it. And also a vast majority, like Jessica is living the dream. She's getting paid to work on open source. A vast majority of contributors have full-time jobs in addition to what they're doing. So the communication time is not, a lot of times it won't be super fast. Sometimes it's not fast at all, and that's okay. The code will still be there. They probably are just busy. Maybe they're on vacation. Who knows? But yeah, just remember those two things if you're feeling a little frustrated when you're contributing. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, is that there are actually people behind those repositories and those projects as well. So also being gracious to them. Aaron, did you have anything to add to that question? If not, I do have a surprise question for Matt.
Only minor thing I have to add is sometimes open source projects could also use graphical assets. Sometimes they could just use a logo or word mark, and that's a great way to express yourself and see, does this fit with the overall community? And generally, communities are really nice. They just want to build up these supportive people. I'm very biased from the Ruby community, but we have a saying called Mina Swan, which is Mats is nice and so we are nice. And Mats is the creator of Ruby. He's from Japan, and the word sounds like minasan, which is the Japanese word for everybody or us. So generally open source communities come from very nice places, so it can be intimidating, but give it a shot. Just best foot forward, and they'll reciprocate.
So the surprise question is taking a different look or approach to this conversation, which Jessica, you did touch on this a little bit, but what advice, and it can be a short sentence or two, but what advice would you give to someone who wanted to become a maintainer of an open source project, and they aren't getting the attention or the help that they need on that repository project, right? So let's say I created a repository in GitHub, put it out to as an open source project, and I would like help, but I'm not getting that sort of assistance or help on that repository. Like, what advice would you give to someone to get that assistance and help as a maintainer?
Yeah, I guess I'll start here. I think that what I've seen, because I know there's a few projects like Open Sauce that has a channel on their Discord about like share your projects, and a lot of times how people describe their project, people don't always understand what the project is, and it makes sense to them, the maintainer, the solo, person working on it, or maybe they're working on it with somebody else, but it's not entirely clear what the project is or what the benefit is. And so learning how to describe it in just an easy way to get people interested is one of the hurdles that a lot of people face, is because they've built it and they're a little bit too close to it, and then they try to explain it to someone else. It's like, I don't really know what your project's about or how I can contribute or how I can help you out there. And so if you're kind of running into issues like getting it out there, just really ask your friends, like, hey, does this project description make sense, or would you contribute to this project? And if they're like, I'm not really sure what it is, that might be part of it. But then also too, just showing either writing about it if you're good with like blogs and stuff like that, or if you're on Twitch or something like that, like pick a medium that you actually like, that you use. And so if you like videos, then you could use YouTube or Twitch, or if you like writing, then of course like blogs and stuff like that. And then just write about it, or stream about it, about you working on the project, about you sharing it regularly on like Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that. And then eventually people will start to see it and just really focus on the unique aspects of the project, and really think about the user first, and like why people should use this, why people might be interested in contributing about the to your project, and that will get people interested. And so don't just lead with like, oh yeah, we're using this super cool tech stack, and it's like, well, that's cool, but what does this thing do? And so just really start thinking about like, what are the cool things that users are going to like about this project, and maintainers will want to actually be a part of it and help, join you and contribute, and you can build out your community that way. And so that would be my advice there.
One thing I would add to that is before having the project that you need help on, see if you can put into words what you're trying to solve. And the wonderful thing about open source is there's something already there that maybe gets you 80% of the way. Because then you can contribute to that project, giving it the needed functionality. Alternatively, I have gone off and coded the wrong thing for, many fun hours, and I learned a lot. So I'm not saying shy away from it. Don't worry about wasting your effort or time. You're still going to learn from it. So go ahead and build if it makes you happy. But know that there may be other areas that you could be building within and learning a new system, and it might be harder than just starting out, but you're going to learn a lot more along the way. And again, open source is it's all around us. We may just already have most of a solution, and you just need to combine it with, I don't know, 2 open source projects, and you mush them together real good, and boom, you have a great open source project.
What they said. And also someone in the chat brought up, like, you can fork a project that has been abandoned. That's something that has definitely been done many times. I know so for Ruby, I think JavaScript is probably like the common denominator for most programmers. So JavaScript has these npm packages that are the libraries they pull in. That equivalent in Ruby is a gem, which is a library that gets pulled in. And there's definitely been gems that are popular, and like the maintainer, something happens and they just are like, I can't keep up with this, I gotta step away, and it falls away because no one steps up to take it. Or like Aaron said, it's like so close to being there, but there's just like not enough. So someone forks that and is like, this gem underscore plus blah blah blah, you know. The thing with that is you're taking on like a responsibility then when you're doing that. Because if people start coming to your project, it's kind of like the whole thing with open source is, okay, people are coming, they want to use your project. Great, that's awesome. And you're using code at your own risk. Like someone could just be like, get up tomorrow and be like, I don't want to do this anymore and walk away. And then you're just frozen in time at where they walked away. But then like as a maintainer, you want to keep working on it for your own benefit too. So there's like this line that you gotta walk as to like, okay, what do I need out of this? What does the community need? Like how are we figuring this out? Because there's a lot of maintainers and contributors burning out from that balance not being ideal. So I think that's something you definitely need to kind of figure out if you want to start a project and start becoming a maintainer. How much are you going to commit to it? Like, what is your cap? What is, and make that clear. Like, there's some projects where they're like in the README, they tell you when each response will come within 2 weeks, you know, like they have that in there. A good way though to advertise Twitch streaming, live build on Twitch. I was doing that for my final project in boot camp, and I had all these randos dropping in, and I'd be like, oh my God, React, Redux, what is this? Why is it not working? I remember there was this one stream where I'm just like, ah, ah, ah. And for each stream, I'd have like the URL link and I put it in the chat and stuff. Someone actually like opened a pull request and said, I think this is going to solve, I think this is going to fix your error and stuff. And I was just like, bless your heart. You're so nice. I'm sorry, I can't accept this because it's for a grade, but thank you so much. But people like empathize with the struggle. So if, and live coding's scary, but at least like you can't see them looking back at you either. So like it's easier to do it on there than Zoom. Yeah. It's fun once you get used to it. It really is.
First, I want to thank all three of you for making the time, putting in the effort to be here. This is something that you're doing out of, your interest in pushing open source forward and making sure that it is a healthy community and a healthy ecosystem. So thank you for making the time and putting in the effort to make this a very rich and good panel discussion. To close out, I'm going to ask all three of you to either, give a short description about yourselves again, or just how people can find you on social media, interact with you outside of this panel. Let's say someone has a question that they want to ask you directly.
I'll give you my quick sign off. I'm Aaron Rosenberg. I've done everything from being a junior dev from a different background in school to a software engineering manager to the CTO of my own company. Open source tools are amazing. They're the reason I got into this field. I enjoy giving back to them. You can find me at my GitHub has a lot of links to contact me. LinkedIn, the same. My email's in there somewhere. Would love to answer any questions you have about my various experiences. specifically Ruby on Rails and JavaScript I've been using for a decade and a half and know a good deal about them. I have to get my React skills dusted off for my new position. So I'll soon be on the bleeding edge of that.
So I'll go next. So it's great to be here and be part of this panel and talk all about open source. And so I dropped the link to my Twitter, but I am Coder Girl 1991 on Twitter. So you can just find me there. That's where I'm like most active. And I'm also really active on like GitHub and with Free Code Camp. And so if you're interested in, contributing there, then we could definitely help you out and you can join the forum. And if you had any questions or if you just want to reach out on Twitter, then I'm most active on there. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Just put a little note from like, hey, saw you in the thing panel, or else I'm just not gonna accept because there's just too much on there. I did the tweets before, still on there a bit, but it's Meg_Gutshall on there. I'm a Ruby on Rails developer and work for Penn Medicine. I use JavaScript as well. Also, if you have any like front-endy stuff like HTML and CSS, that's my jam. Like it. And yeah, I've been programming for 6 years now. So yeah, good times.